I feel like the table is all set. We have the suspect who's been locked up for a year and a half. We have our attorneys. We have our judge. And we have our witnesses. So what's missing? Oh, that's right. The evidence. Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk about the hearing that happened yesterday. And I also want to talk about the hearing that happened last week. I want to combine the two because Detective Mowry testified last week, and his name also came up in yesterday's hearing. So I think Detective Mowry may have downplayed his role in this entire investigation. When Detective Mowry was questioned by Ann Taylor last week, he kind of made it sound like he was just helping out where he could. He was just lending a hand. And the only reason that he went back into the Cast Viz program right before last week's hearing was because he was asked by the prosecution to go back and see if he could find some information. Miraculously, he did find some information that he had just forgotten about. So Ann Taylor and the defense have been asking the prosecution for evidence for a year and a half now. And the prosecution has kind of given that impression that we don't have any evidence to give. We've given you everything that we have. Bill Thompson stood up at the prosecutor's table and he said, we can't give you what we don't have. We've given you all of the evidence. Now, Ann Taylor knew that wasn't true. I think we all knew that that wasn't true. So when Detective Mowry gets on the stand and begins talking, Ann Taylor is questioning him about all of this information that they're missing from the Cast Viz report. And he begins saying, well, you know, the prosecution asked me to go back in yesterday and I found some more information, but I never saved my work. I never saved the process that it took me to get to those results. But I took screenshots and video recordings of it. So this detective appears to be extremely uncomfortable when he's talking about this program. He doesn't seem knowledgeable at all. He's definitely not an expert in this Cast Viz program. And he kind of makes it sound like he's kind of just dabbling with it. But it's crazy because he just received an award, a big award by the Secret Service for his excellent work in digital forensics. So he goes back into the Cast Viz program. He finds some information that he just forgot about. So while Bryan Kohberger is sitting in jail during these court hearings, investigators are basically just forgetting about evidence that they had, important evidence. So this, to me, in my opinion, is either incompetence or they're withholding evidence on purpose. Ann Taylor is asking Detective Mowry about the process. You know, she wants him to show his work. How did you come to the conclusion that this is the path of travel that Bryan Kohberger took from Pullman to Moscow? Now, as I said, he doesn't seem very knowledgeable about this because he basically lets Ann Taylor know that he can't really show her the process that he used because he didn't save it. He basically just exited out of the program without saving his work, which is strange because you would think that he would know we're going to need this for court. You know, these investigators, this prosecution, they know that Ann Taylor is going to attack the evidence and the investigation. So it seems as though they would know that they're going to need this process in order to show the defense how they came to these results that resulted in Bryan Kohberger being arrested and indicted. Because they used this information for the PCA. They used this information for the grand jury. So why can't they just present this information to the defense? Why can't they just present the information that they used to secure warrants and secure an arrest warrant and the package that they presented to the grand jury? Why not just, submit that to the defense? Because they don't have it. They don't have that process. The only thing that they have are the results. So basically, like I said, he seems very uncomfortable. He doesn't seem to really know a lot about what he's talking about when it comes to the CastViz program. Now, the prosecution even has to kind of answer a question for him that he was stumped on by Ann Taylor. Because Ann Taylor asked him, why didn't you save your work in the program? Why did you delete the session? And he basically has no answer. He doesn't really know. He's like, I got screenshots, I got video recordings, but I didn't save my work. So then the prosecution chimes in when they begin their questioning of Detective Mowry, and they basically answer the question for him. So they basically say, oh, and the reason that you didn't save your work is because you knew that you could go back into the program and do it again. Isn't that right? And then, of course, he says, well, yeah, of course that's right. So he didn't save his work for a reason. This man is a detective. He's a forensics detective. So he's done this a few times. This probably isn't his first time in court. It seems as though he would know the process. But instead, he deletes his work. So now, the only way for Ann Taylor to double check his work is to try to go back into the program. The problem is they don't possess all of the information that she needs to go back into that program and check his work. So if they don't have all of that information, then how did they come up with the information that they needed for the PCA as well as for the grand jury? So that didn't really make a lot of sense. It's definitely looks sketchy. It doesn't look like everything is happening on the up and up. And of course, the prosecution is just looking straight down at the table. They don't even want to acknowledge that the defense is asking these questions. They just kind of want to look down at the table and pretend like they don't really understand what's happening. And I can understand that because they're looking pretty foolish right now. Detective Mowry deflects a lot of the information because he's basically saying, I wasn't in charge of that investigation. He kind of makes it sound as though he was just helping out where he could. He was asked by the prosecution to go back in and see if there was any more information, which that was nice of them to do that after a year and a half of Bryan Kohberger sitting in jail. Maybe go back and see if we forgot something. They just don't seem very thorough, and I can't pinpoint whether it's just sheer incompetence or if they're actually withholding evidence and hiding information on purpose. Because for the prosecution and for this detective, it almost looks like it's their first time in court. And this is a major case. This is a capital case. So they don't really appear to be up to par when it comes to proving why Bryan Kohberger is guilty. So it makes me wonder if he's just passing the buck. You know, maybe this detective had more to do with this investigation than he was letting on. And now that things are kind of unraveling, it seems as though, you know, he's trying to kind of put some distance between himself and this cast viz information, which we know that he worked on. Yesterday, it was Corporal Brett Payne from the Moscow Police Department, as well as Cy Ray, who's the expert in cellular geolocation mapping, which basically means he can tell where you were by your cell phone. And Taylor began yesterday with Corporal Brett Payne, which worked out great because then Cy Ray can listen to his testimony and respond. So Payne is the officer who authored the exhibit to the PCA. He's also the lead investigator in the Idaho 4 case. He also doesn't appear to be too knowledgeable about where evidence is located. He just continues to refer Ann Taylor back to Moscow Police Department. He doesn't really seem to know where a lot of this evidence is located. There's 1,000 hours, over 1,000 hours of video from 79 different businesses and residential properties. But not 1 minute of that over 1,000 hours of footage shows Bryan Kohberger's white Hyundai Elantra leaving the crime scene, leaving the Moscow, Idaho house and driving back to Pullman. Not one frame shows his car driving from the King Road house back to Pullman, Washington. There's video missing. And now Ann Taylor wants to know, is there audio missing as well? And we're about to find out here in just a second that there's also cellular data that's missing as well. Alyssa Masseth from the defense compares the manner in which the defense is receiving evidence to standing inside of a snow globe. That's how unorganized that these investigators and this prosecution is right now. Either this really is a lack of evidence, or the prosecution is stalling for time. Now, Bill Thompson stood in front of the court and said that he believed that there was maybe 3% of the evidence left to hand over, that they had handed over 97% of the information. So it appears as though Bill might be off by a couple of numbers, because from these court hearings, it really does appear like there is a lot of evidence that still has not been handed over to Ann Taylor and the defense. It makes me wonder what was in that 51 terabytes of information that everyone's hanging their hat on. Everyone keeps saying, well, the prosecution handed over 51 terabytes of information to the defense. But now it's making me wonder, is that just 51 terabytes of garbage? Is that something that was handed over to the defense just to hold them over for a little while? It sounds as though all of the crucial evidence that the prosecution needs to convict Bryan Kohberger is missing. Corporal Brett Payne, he appears to be very respectful while he's on the stand. But he also appears to be very ill-informed about this investigation, which is odd because he's the lead investigator. So you would think that he would be on top of a lot of this information, but he's not. Or maybe he is, and he's just not revealing, much information to the defense, which seems strange because now would be the time to do that. So, in my opinion, Payne's testimony casts more doubt on the already sketchy-looking PCA. And Cy Ray is about to put a stamp on that because he is next up to the stand. Cy Ray appears to be very intelligent, and it sounds like he knows what he's talking about when it comes to his work. He's also he doesn't appear to be biased toward the defense or the prosecution. It sounds like he really just wants to talk about the facts. Now, Cy Ray, he says that crucial evidence in this cast viz report is missing. He explains to Ann Taylor that 2 to 3% of this information is missing. And it's the most important information that he needs in order to recreate this map that Moscow Police Department created. So there's already information missing in the cellular data. And Cy Ray explains that this is the most important information. He describes the inconsistencies in the cellular data and basically explains that it could be that the machines that investigators were using for this data were not calibrated correctly. Or he also says that it's possible that this information could have been manipulated. He says this could be human error, or this could be caused by a human, which would mean that this information was possibly manipulated. Now, didn't we just hear about the video in which the audio was manipulated? Now, Cy Ray doesn't accuse investigators of manipulating the evidence, but it's very apparent that he's definitely skeptical. He's definitely concerned that there could be some human interference at play in this evidence. At least that's what I got from his testimony. He seems extremely knowledgeable about what he's talking about. It's kind of a breath of fresh air when you're watching this trial that there's actually someone who knows what they're talking about and can answer all of the questions. It's just strange that they have a mountain of evidence, but they don't have the little bit of evidence that it would take to prove that Bryan Kohberger is guilty. I've said from the very beginning that they could have 1,000,000 terabytes of evidence, but if they don't have that 1 gigabyte that proves Bryan Kohberger's guilt, then all they have is a mountain of junk. Also, can I just say that defense attorney Alyssa Masseth is awesome. She doesn't take any BS. She's all business when she steps up to that podium, and she's the spark that this defense team really needed. She comes with credentials, and she has state court and federal court experience. So she knows what she's talking about. She knows how this process works. Now, Ann Taylor, she's really stepped up to the plate as well. I've been very impressed with the job that Ann Taylor is doing. This really does appear to be a defense team that believes that their client, Bryan Kohberger, is 100% innocent. And you can tell that they have every intention of proving that. Now, the prosecution, not so much. It's not a good look for the prosecution when they continue to say that they've handed over all of the evidence, when we know that there's video, audio, and cellular data missing. It's here, it's there, it's everywhere. It's all over the place. The FBI has some of it. Moscow Police Department has some of it. This person has some of it. That person has some of it. There's a little bit of this evidence just kind of roaming around everywhere. And that's not a good look. You know, it looks very sloppy. It looks unorganized. And it looks like either they don't have their ducks in a row or they're trying to cover something up, as I've said in many videos before. Either this investigation and this prosecution's case is just a scattered mess, or this is all by design. I kind of feel like it really is a scattered mess. I really feel as though this prosecution is drowning at this point. They don't have the crucial evidence that they need. And now what's coming into play is, how did you get all these warrants and this indictment with all of this sketchy information that you can't even no longer provide to the defense? It's just not a good look, in my opinion. And I feel as though I was expecting a lot more from this prosecution, especially from the beginning when Bill Thompson was standing up there basically taking control of the courtroom. We're seeing a very different Bill Thompson at this point. So we'll see. We've got another hearing coming up and more witnesses. And hopefully these witnesses will actually have some real information. So thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Again, I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.